Connor Hale was no ordinary CEO. Renowned for his sharp mind and innovative strategies, he had built Bright Future Solutions from a modest startup into one of the top tech firms in the industry. To the outside world, he was the epitome of success, polished, decisive, and admired for his ability to drive his company forward. But lately, Connor had begun to feel something was missing. Despite the accolades and profits, he couldn't shake a growing sense of disconnection from the very people who had made his company successful. In the pursuit of growth and innovation, had he lost sight of the most important aspect of all, the people? As a child, Connor had watched his mother work tirelessly as a janitor to support their family. He vividly remembered how she would work long hours, cleaning office buildings, mopping floors, and scrubbing toilets, only to return home exhausted, her hands raw from the work. Despite her efforts, she was often invisible, overlooked by most of the people who passed her by. It was a lesson Connor never forgot. People matter, no matter their title. Yet, in the whirlwind of his CEO duties, he had unknowingly fallen into the trap of only seeing employees through the lens of numbers and productivity. One sleepless night, Connor found himself thinking about his mother and her tireless work ethic. He wondered what it would be like to reconnect with the people who truly powered his company, the ones who worked behind the scenes. What if he could see his company from their eyes? What if, for just a week, he could experience life from the perspective of someone who wasn't in a high-powered meeting or making important decisions but was doing the hard, often thankless work that kept the company running? An idea began to take root. Connor decided to go undercover as a janitor. It wasn't just about seeing his company from a different perspective, it was about understanding the culture that had developed within his firm. Were employees happy? Did they feel seen and appreciated? Or were they simply cogs in a machine working tirelessly to fuel the company's relentless drive for success? More than that, he wanted to experience the emotional side of the company, the camaraderie, the respect, or the lack of it. Would anyone even notice him? The transformation begins. One Monday morning, Connor showed up to the office dressed in a faded, oversized janitor's jumpsuit. His hands, usually neatly manicured and never far from a designer pen or smartphone, now gripped the handle of a janitor's cart. He had pulled the cap low over his face, deliberately hiding his identity. His once pristine, polished appearance was now replaced by the uniform of someone who did hard, invisible work. As he glanced into the elevator's reflection, even he struggled to recognize himself. This wasn't the Connor Hale the world knew. This was a man who had become part of the background, a cog in the machinery of the office. His first few days passed much as he expected. Most employees breezed past him without a second glance. Some nodded curtly, offering polite acknowledgement, but their faces were blank, indifferent. He was just the janitor after all, a faceless figure who swept the floors, emptied the trash bins, and mopped the halls. It was a humbling experience for Connor, one that made him reflect on how easily people in positions of power could become disconnected from the daily lives of their employees. The indifference he witnessed was disheartening. Was this really what his company had become? A place where people walked by each other without truly seeing one another? Where even the simplest acts of kindness were rare? But Connor pressed on. He continued cleaning, observing, and listening, quietly making his way through the office with his cart. He could hear snippets of conversations, some mundane, some revealing, but most of them filled with little regard for the people they were talking about. On the third day, Connor's resolve was tested when he overheard a conversation in the break room, a moment of disappointment. As he mopped the floors near the coffee machine, he overheard a group of employees chatting. One of them, a young junior developer named Eli, whom Connor had recently recommended for a promotion, glanced up at Connor briefly, then quickly turned away. Connor was used to being looked at in a certain way, admired or respected for his position. But the way Eli looked at him now was different, dismissive, almost condescending. Then Connor heard the words that stung him more than any criticism. "You'd think they could hire younger janitors," Eli said with a laugh. This guy barely keeps up with the mess." Laughter erupted from the group, and the sting of their words cut deeper than Connor anticipated. Here he was, trying to understand his employees by walking in their shoes, only to hear mockery from someone he had mentored and believed in. It made him question whether his experiment was even worth it. But Connor didn't reveal his identity. He kept his head down, pretending not to hear, and continued his work. As the day wore on, he grew more and more disillusioned by the culture around him. Had the company really lost touch with the values of respect and kindness that had once driven its success? Had people like Eli forgotten what it meant to be a team? The unexpected encounter. It wasn't until later that afternoon, while cleaning the windows in one of the smaller meeting rooms, that Connor met someone who would change everything. Isabel was a soft-spoken customer support associate known for her warm demeanor and genuine care for others. She was humming softly to herself, earbuds in place as she entered the room, unaware of the janitor working just inside. When she noticed Connor, she paused, pulled out her earbuds, and smiled at him warmly. "Hi there," she said, her voice light. "Need a hand with that?" Connor, surprised by her sudden attention, mumbled, "No thank you, miss. I'm fine." But Isabel wasn't having it. With a quick glance at the heavy bucket Connor was carrying, she walked over to him and grabbed the handle with surprising strength for someone her size. "You look like you've been working non-stop," she said, her voice soft but firm. "When's the last time you took a break?" "I'm fine," Connor stammered, unsure of how to react. "Really, I'm just doing my job." Isabel wasn't deterred. She continued, "My grandmother was a janitor too. People often forget the hard work that goes into keeping everything running smoothly. But I want you to know that I see you. I appreciate what you do here." Her words were simple, yet they struck Connor deeply. He had expected indifference, maybe even some disdain. But instead, Isabel treated him with the same kindness and respect she would offer any colleague, no matter their role. As she handed him a cup of coffee from her own stash, Connor felt something inside him shift. This wasn't just a fleeting gesture of kindness. It was a reminder of the company's values that had been overshadowed by the focus on profits and productivity. Isabel's compassion reminded him of what had been missing: genuine human connection. A life-changing decision. After that moment, everything changed for Connor. He realized that Isabel's kindness was not an isolated incident. It was a reflection of the company's heart, the part of the culture that had been forgotten but was still there, waiting to be reignited. He knew what he had to do. The next day, Connor continued his undercover work, but with a renewed sense of purpose. He observed more employees, paying closer attention to the small gestures, the unspoken moments of kindness, and the everyday acts of empathy. Isabel's warmth stood out like a beacon in a sea of indifference, and by the end of the week, Connor had made up his mind. He was going to take action. That afternoon, as Isabel was clocking out, Connor approached her. He handed her a small folded note with a quiet, "Thank you." She looked at him curiously, then tucked the note into her pocket with a polite smile, but she had no idea what was to come. The reveal. The following morning, Isabel was called to the executive boardroom, something she had only ever seen from a distance. Her heart raced as she entered the room, and she froze when she saw none other than Connor Hale sitting at the head of the table, smiling warmly. "Mr. Hale?" she stammered, her eyes wide in disbelief. "Please call me Connor," he said, gesturing for her to sit. As Isabel sat down, Connor began to explain the secret project he had embarked on, how he had spent the past week undercover as a janitor to understand the true culture of the company. He told her about the impact her kindness had had on him, and how it represented the very heart of what Bright Future Solutions stood for. "Isabel," he said, his voice filled with sincerity, "your empathy, the way you treat every person here with respect, that's the kind of leadership I want in this company. I want Bright Future Solutions to be known for its heart, not just its bottom line." He paused, letting the words sink in, then handed her a letter. "This is not just a thank you. It's a promotion. Effective immediately, you're the new team lead in customer relations, with a pay increase. You've earned it." Isabel's hands shook as she read the letter. Tears welled in her eyes as the realization sank in. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Connor replied. "You've already shown me what leadership is." The news of Connor's undercover experiment quickly spread throughout the company. Employees were shocked to learn that their CEO had worked as a janitor to better understand their world. But more than that, they were inspired. Isabel's promotion wasn't just a reward for her hard work. It was a symbol of what the company stood for: kindness, respect, and empathy at every level.